Hey guys, what's up? So today I want to talk about chapter 20 in Genesis. Keep in mind this is only one mystic point of view. It doesn't mean it's the only one or that it's right, but understanding the Bible, at least in my opinion, from a mystic lens, has given me a lot more understanding and reasoning as to how to really live life in the sense of being a god on earth. This isn't a narcissistic, gosh, I can't talk. This isn't a narcissistic take on, claiming like this ego-driven thought process of like, I'm the only one that matters. It's like, yes and no. You are the only one that matters in the sense of you're the only one that matters in the idea of you're controlling your mind and you need to take responsibility for it. Your mind is like a wild animal and you need to tell it to sit. We will all think thoughts at certain points of time when we're stressed or challenged that probably don't serve us because they're emotionally being charged because we're judging our reality. But when you understand you're a creator, this is where the part of sovereignty comes into play and removes the narcissism. When you understand that you're the creator, you have the free will to wake up conscious and change the outcome of the experience you're currently experiencing. Okay, so if you're given this diagnosis of a particular illness, right, and you receive the news and you're emotionally charged because you were expecting to receive bad news, understand your judgment created that reality. You know, there other things might play into it, but I'm a firm believer that the more you believe and think something and make it your subconscious awareness of what you focus on, it becomes your experience. And I know this firsthand because it happened to me twice in my life where I had an autoimmune issue for over 8 years, as well as a injury that I changed the diagnosis for within over a night. And it's insane when you really get that conviction in your own experience and start understanding, oh wow, the way I think and feel about myself is exactly what I will experience in the outside world in my day-to-day experiences, okay? So the whole Bible, in my opinion, is allegory for you. I believe certain parts of the Bible are true in the sense of maybe these things had existed at some point in time, but the way it's put together and constructed as this incredible story is exactly that. It's just a story to explain your psychology, right? So for everything, like, this might not directly relate, but it's like, oh, for every joke, there's a little bit of truth underneath it. For every story or whatever, there's a little bit of truth underneath it somewhere, some way. And so I'm just going to go with that. I believe it comes from an allegoric lens and it's parable for you to wake up to your Christ consciousness power in the sense of being able to change your diagnosis if you want to have a different experience, in the sense of being able to manifest a genuine true love that's a reflection of your self-worth and the new conditioning you gave yourself, in the sense of receiving abundance seemingly out of nowhere because you understand that money isn't evil, right? Like the indoctrination of strict religious institutions make us feel we're born sinners and that we lack something and that, life is our problem that we're here. And it's like, no, we were given the opportunity to be here. The reason, in my opinion, why Eve bit the apple from the tree of knowledge is because Eve represents the feminine nature. She's the spirit. In order to fully incarnate into a human vessel, you need knowledge, which means you need something to hold knowledge, which is a mind. And that's where Adam comes into play. So the fact that they both recognized, oh my God, we're naked, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just saying, I have a mind now to judge my experience and my reality. And that's why you have to leave Eden, because you're no longer a spirit. You're a human being, and now you can play in the realm called Earth, okay? So biting the apple is not evil. The talking snake is not evil, in my opinion. It's just giving you the opportunity to choose. Similar to the Matrix, you have the red pill, the blue pill. What do you want to take, okay? And maybe I don't know that reference that all too well to explain those pill things, but it's the concept again. You always have the choice to be conscious or unconscious, and when you choose to be conscious, you become a God figure on earth, understanding again your thoughts, your judgments, your emotions create your experience and your life and your reality. So I'm going to hop into the first verse here in chapter 20 in the book of Genesis, and it says, "And Abraham journeyed from thence towards the south country, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar." Understand in scripture, when cities are mentioned or names are mentioned or numbers are there, everything has a purpose. It's not just like this randomly hashed out last minute thought that they were like, you know what, we'll name this guy Joseph. It's like it came from something, and chances are through time, through all of the translations scripture has gotten, plus the removal of all the other books, like the book of Thomas, that talks about all of Jesus's, I think, parables where he speaks about Christ consciousness in the lens that I'm talking about, right? Giving the power back to the people rather than giving it directly to the church, thinking you owe the church something to like be a better person in a place called heaven. And it's like, again, why would we have a human experience for the end goal to just be death, to like finally be happy then? That doesn't make sense. An all-loving God, who we know is the source of humanity and whatever and everything else, wouldn't create a fiery pit of hell for you just to be in. Like, that sounds like a demonic God. And again, that's my literal interpretation, or that's my understanding of why people who take scripture literally are people who want to control you. Because if you tell me that God, who's ever loving, is putting me in a pit of hell called earth to only, have to pay back for my sins and I have to wait for somebody to save me, that sounds like a prison sentence, okay? And that's where I think religion has gotten it wrong. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but you can see how when society takes things that are beautiful in nature and had an incredible origin that gave power to the people, how society, who wants to keep people under control and under wraps, will spin the narrative so it works in their favor and tell you, hey, you're God, he's nice, but he wants you to suffer like bad all the time. We should really take a step back and double think about what heaven and hell really is. Is it really a place you go after death? Or is it a place you choose once you have an ego death and you resurrect in your awareness and notice that your judgment created heaven and hell for your experience on earth in the first place, right? And when you come from that knowingness, that consciousness, now you can redirect your thoughts and emotions to be in either realm that serves you best, whether it's hellish thoughts or heavenly thoughts, and you create that experience on earth, right? And now you're a God on earth and you witness that you can create miracles, because miracles are your prayers being answered and manifestations coming to life. That's really it. All these things mean the same thing, right? So I'm just gonna turn on the AC here because it's hot. And now I'm gonna go back to this verse. So I wanted to go through all of that, just to go back to that. Everything has meaning, okay? And Kadesh and Shur and Gerar are the cities that are mentioned. So look at the meanings between these names. We have Kadesh, which is a place of holiness. We have Shur, which means a wall or barrier. And we have Gerar, which means conflict and friction. And understand that Abraham is going south after chapter 19 when Sodom and Gomorrah fell apart. Lot was in Sodom when it fell apart and he escaped, but Abraham was observing it. Lot represents Abraham's ego in that situation, or his mind construct. The fact that Abraham is watching Lot leave Sodom, a place of wickedness, is allegory for Abraham witnessing his mind leaving the place that kept him wicked and in his old version of himself, right? Lot leaving Sodom is actually an allegory for Abraham leaving his old version of himself behind that no longer serves him. And all that is saying is the reason why it's said that way is for you to look at it and to see how that reflects you, right? When you want to change and you want to become a different version of yourself that honestly is in better alignment, chances are you're going to leave behind wicked thoughts you had towards yourself that didn't serve you very well, right? Like, so let's say you want to get fit and you want to go out and be more confident in your own skin. Instead of sitting on the couch all day, maybe you'll start with going for a walk around the block. And then now you're leaving that Sodom, that couch that used to just kept you in bondage, feeling like crap, and now you're moving and you're doing something really good for your body and getting all the endorphins and the courage and the confidence to get out there and actually do something makes you want to go make a snowball effect, right? And that's progress, and that's you leaving Sodom behind and going to the mountaintop, because that's where Lot goes after he leaves Sodom. And going to the mountaintop is allegory for you going to the highest point of your body, which is your crown chakra, your third eye, your pineal gland. So you can see, hey, if I'm leaving Sodom, a place of wickedness and baggage, which is a very low vibration down here, now you're going to the mountaintop, the highest vibration, which is your connection to the Father. And in, Catholicism, this is now I understand when you say the name of the Father and the name of the Son, you say the name of the Father because your connection to Source is right there through your pineal gland. And then the name of the Son is by your heart and your solar plexus. Understand your solar plexus is the sun, right? There's a reason why it's there, and that there's a reason why it's yellow, and it's a yellow ball right here underneath your heart. In this area is where you give birth because you have an emotional expression. You are Jesus. Like, in my opinion, Jesus didn't exist. He's just an allegory for your potential. And he had said, what I can do, you can do better. And people are like, oh no, Jesus, you're the only one who can create miracles. And it's just like, no, you're not. Why would we be born here just to stay asleep forever? That doesn't make sense. The point is to wake up to the second coming of consciousness, which is the second coming of Christ, and that happens within you. You will save you. I think there's been enough war, death, trafficking of a bunch of things that are not good in this life, in not even this lifetime, in like hundreds of years. You'd think there had been so much disgusting things that had gone on. Jesus would come back and prevent it if if that was even supposed to happen. How much more of that sacrifice do we have to do in the negative sense of losing our own kind of, humanity, and like suffering in the sense of not being able to afford stuff because we believe in lack. We don't believe in abundance. That keeps you in bondage. That keeps you in Egypt. And there's the reason why Egypt means bondage, because look at the place. It's dry as hell. And when you feel lack, you feel dry as hell. You're depleted of your water. Water relates to emotions, and that's why you get baptized, because honestly, it reflects to the concept of you crying. When you release all the pressure and the stress, you start crying, and that's your biological baptism, right? So, the allegory of water is that it's purifying. It carries an electric charge in its flow, and when you engage in a body of water that is flowing, it redirects your current for you to be re-energized. That's why jumping into a stream is so rejuvenating and refreshing, right? Because we are a part of nature, and when we understand these basic principles of reality, then we can really have the highest energy, the biggest joy, the biggest purpose on earth. We can finally be in alignment with ourselves. And that's why I do what I do here, is because I might go on these tangents, I might go off the rails, but it's all related to each other. When you recognize that you are genuinely a God on earth, you remove the bondage and you call the shots. You see through everything with transparency. And when you witness that your conviction of what you believe has to happen, then you no longer have fear. And in the Bible, it says like over 80 times, do not be afraid. And that's exactly why. Because when you have fear, fear will be the mirror and come to you. You do not want that experience, so don't even bother with it. I know it's hard. I know I stumble with it all the time, but the point is to practice. And the more conviction you have, which in Latin means faith, the more understanding you'll have is like, right, this is just a simulation. And all I have to do is show up every day aware of that and be mindful of what I think, feel, and judge. So I'm going to go back to this and go to Kadesh, Shur, and Gerar. So Kadesh means holy place, Shur means barrier, Gerar means a place of friction. And this is, again, like I had said, Abraham is going here because the old version of himself had just died in chapter 19. So when you have an ego death with yourself, what happens, right? The old identifying thoughts you had no longer exist. You really got rid of them. Now you're in a space of vulnerability, because the question is, who do you want to be? And when you feel like you don't identify with what kept you in the past, like let's say an addiction to something, right? Normally people will always stay with their addiction because it gives them their mind a sense of having to figure something out. So if you don't have a tamed mind, typically it will run crazy, because the mind's responsibility is always to keep your body safe and to solve problems. If we keep thinking we have problems, the mind will always be on and stay in that karmic loop. If you turn that off because you recognize you're causing your problems in the first place with your judgments, then you can, leave the place of bondage, which is Egypt or Gerar. So all of that to say is that Abraham really forgot, or doesn't really know who he is now. He left the old version of himself behind, but he doesn't know who he's showing up to become. Because really think about it, when you follow your intuition, you don't know what the hell you're gonna become. Like, you have an idea, you have these visuals, you feel inspiration when you imagine yourself being in a particular position or having a certain experience, but you really don't know all the underlying factors of that experience in itself. So it can be very intimidating when you don't welcome the unknown that is a gift from your intuition, right? When you answer your calling, you have no idea what the hell is going to happen. And that's why it's scary. So here, when Abraham is going to a place called Gerar, and he's going southward, in my opinion, in the cardinal directions, you have north, south, east, and west. North is symbolic of the human body, the physical world, the flesh. The south is your passions and your, I want to say inner nature, but not really, your drive to an extent. The east is connected to your divinity and spirituality, and the west is connected to your intellect. So, or your ego. So when you go down south, you reflect on your passions, and notice how you bow your head when you go down south. So what does that mean? You're not showing up in the world with with your face and seeing people at face value. You're going within, removing the identification of your 3D physical flesh, and you're identifying with your 4D realm, okay? And when you go down south, you're going in between two cities called Kadesh and Shur. Kadesh means holy, Shur means wall or barrier. So when you're going in to reflect, hey, I just had this ego death because Sodom is destroyed, and that's a reflection of me losing my old version of myself. I'm reflecting between my masculine nature and my feminine nature, Kadesh and Shur, okay? You want to understand who you're meant to become, and now these two aspects of yourself inside you are colliding because your mind feels a little bit out of control and your spirit's trying to break through to tell you, hey, you're doing a good job, okay? And that's very scary because the mind likes control, and it doesn't have control when your spirit is breaking through and taking over and telling you to go somewhere when your mind can't comprehend where that place is. And that's why Gerar is called friction, because having this experience gives you anxiety and friction when you don't really understand it well. Understand that this is the second time this is happening to Abraham. This whole chapter, chapter 20, literally happened in chapter 12 when Abraham went to Egypt. Abraham went to Egypt after God asked him to leave his hometown of Ur behind. And that was Abraham answering his calling. Ur means sin, and sin means missing the mark or dwelling in your emotions. So he left the place of sin or dwelling in his emotions or living in his 3D reality to answer his intuition. And he did it for a little while until he got scared and went between two cities called Bethel and Hai, which again represent your spiritual nature and your masculine nature, your spirit and your ego. And he went down southward to reflect in Egypt. And Pharaoh was the person that kept him in bondage down there for a second, or at least his wife Sarah, which will get reflected here by King Abemelich, who also takes Sarah in the same exact way. And all that is to say is that both times this happens are just your multiple ego deaths you have until you embody Christ consciousness, until you embody the concept of I am. And what I mean by I am is when Moses confronts God and says, God, who are you? And God says, I am that I am. Wouldn't you think an all-intelligent, all-knowing, this incredible creator of the most expansive simulation to ever exist from what my mind can perceive, which isn't very much, okay? Wouldn't you think God would say, hey, my name's God? That would make logical sense. But understand scripture is not logical or literal, at least in my point of view. So there has to be a meaning as to why he says I am. Because if you said, hey, what's your name? And I said, hey, I am. You'd be like, you're what, hungry? Tired? What? Right? You would look at that literally. You wouldn't see the wisdom behind it. So when God says I am that I am, it means you become whatever you claim to be. I am sick. I am healthy. I am beautiful. People love me. I am not doing well. People don't want to give me job opportunities. I'm ugly, like whatever. Like I think I said ugly twice. But you know what I'm saying about what are you claiming? And the more you think about that and embody it, the more it'll become your actual experience. So be very careful about what you think and feel and judge, because that becomes you. So here, Abraham is just having a second ego death. And I mean, makes sense. We fall asleep and wake up to our consciousness all the time. It's not like we're taught to do this when we're first born. We're indoctrinated into a system that says, hey, go to an education thing, a school or whatever. And then we get used to like going to a 9 to 5 because we get indoctrinated to go to school from like 7 in the morning till 2 p.m. And we're just told that this is normal. But when did this even get introduced? This was like introduced with the Rockefeller era in the 1920s. And who knows what happened before then? Granted, we understand it's like more farming culture, more family culture, more community culture, but you understand if you have a strong family and a strong community, you're bound by love, and love is a high freaking frequency that cannot be tamed, right? That is authenticity and genuine expression is what breaks the matrix. You're no longer a victim to it because you see you can control it. You become the matrix, okay? And by the way, matrix in Latin created the word mother. Mother derives from the word matrix. So, and the reason, it does. The reason why it does that is because in Latin, matrix means womb. So you see, when you are connected to God's source, like gives you the power to create, and you have this emotional expression towards what you visualize, you give birth to your experience or your manifestation in the matrix or the womb, okay? So anytime in scripture mother is mentioned, know that that's referring to the simulation. Father is your connection to divinity, and your son is your emotional expression. What are you giving birth to, right? Children are always your manifestations, at least from what I've seen so far. So if you have a community that is super genuine, connected, has really great morals in that lens, you're really hard to control. But if you have a community that is, barren in their emotional connection with their communities, is, drugged up in all these pharmaceutical pills, and is very unhealthy and doesn't feel like they have a connection to any kind of spiritual nature because religion really doesn't teach it like this in this sense. When you have a community that's deprived of the basic foundation of what makes a human being thrive, which is like nourishment on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level, you're easy to control because you feel lack and you're trying to figure out where you belong. That's why I think the world is the way it is right now. But anyway, I'm just going to continue. I honestly forgot where I left off. But again, I go on these tangents because I think they're important and they say a lot about the way we live right now in modern day society. So I'm going to go now. Well, I'll just summarize verse 1. He's having a second ego death. It takes us multiple ego deaths to wake up to our awareness, right? I would fall asleep all the time. And I only really recently woke up a lot more easily, about half a year ago. And I'm practicing it more and more every day. And the more I practice, the more results I see. And it's like, why would I ever stop? And this is what I want other people to wake up to because it's legit, it's real. You just have to know it. And in my opinion, what has solidified it more for me is understanding scripture. If every single freaking scripture and religious book is talking about your psychology and how you master it, I want to know what it says. And I want to share with people what it says so they can wake up too. Okay, so we have verse 2. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abemelich, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. So here, this is literally paralleling the concept of Abraham giving Sarah to Pharaoh in chapter 12. Because same shit happens. He says, hey, Sarah's my sister. And King Abemelich, for whatever reason, is like, all right, yeah, sounds good. Let me take her. And it's like, why? Why would you lie and say that that's your sister? It's absolutely your wife, but why would that make a difference? And it's because any kind of relational understanding between people, whether it's wife, sister, daughter, brother, mother, father, they all mean something in mysticism. And this is one take, but in my opinion, wife means emotions and sister means spirit. So here, Abraham is cloaking the concept that his wife is not actually his spirit, is cloaking the concept of his genuine nature of being a spirit, and is telling King Abimelech, who represents the mind, the ego, or your mind and your ego, hey man, this whole feminine nature thing is just my emotions. Wife means emotions. So in order to have the mind better understand spirit, I'm going to say this really quick. How long did it take you to understand I am? You had to burn out all the things like tarot, crystals, Paul DeSanto, doing rituals and shit, and maybe there's a lot of merit to it, but it all watered down to what you believed in created your experience, right? So you don't need objects to reflect back to you what you know. If you just know something, it will get reflected back to you. You don't need other modalities, okay? So here, Abraham is trying to, literally, it's you, picture you standing here and you have your mind trying to understand your spirit for the second ego death you've ever had. You're going through this crisis of maybe crystals will help, maybe tarot, I need a tarot reading, maybe a psychic will know something. And again, not disrespecting these modalities, but you see how the mind is going crazy, which again is King Abemelich. Sarah's just chilling and she's not saying anything, she's mute, right? And because understand, the spirit doesn't have to scream to be heard. The spirit just will be there in silence because it knows the truth. Typically, people who scream and are crazy in public is because their minds are crazy and they don't feel like they are being seen. And if they knew that they were perfect as they were, they would be quiet. They wouldn't give a fuck. And that's what Sarah is. She's quiet and she hardly says anything because she embodies truth. She's the feminine nature, and that is aspect and allegory for your connection to spirit or source or whatever you want to call it, divine wisdom. So think Luna Lovegood in Harry Potter, right? She's a little out there, a little weird, but she genuinely doesn't care. And she just is in her feels of just enjoying her vibe and being a weirdo. But really it's because she doesn't care. And that's why she's one of the most lovable characters, because she's just doing her. And that is being genuine. And genuine nature is exactly how you're meant to express, because when you're genuine, you're authentically expressing how God wanted to express through you, right? You're choosing to show up as the things you love. The things you love you do not choose, they choose you, meaning God made you feel this about certain things. So my recommendation is to enjoy embodying those things, because you will glow, people will be attracted to you, you will be connected to your purpose, and your abundance will come flowing in because now you're a magnet for it, all right? So Abraham here is trying to explain to his mind that, like, listen, the spirit is like kind of like your emotions, man. Like it's like a feeling thing. It doesn't have to do with like overthinking. It's just like a vibe you have within you. And Abemelich is just like, let me try to understand this more. So he takes him into his house. He doesn't specify house, but it just says take him in, I think. Or take her in. So the fact that Abemelich is taking Sarah in means the mind is trying to overwhelm the spirit and trying to understand what it is. What emotion? What do you mean by emotions? Like I don't like that. I'm speaking as Abemelich, right? I don't like that I can't be in control, because again, Abemelich is the mind. The mind does not like your spirit or your intuition because it cannot quantify what it has in store for you, okay? The mind likes over-calculating every single outcome because it can understand what's a threat in your experience and what's not, and that's to protect the body. You see that your overthinking mind isn't there to drive you crazy, it's there to protect your physical form, but your spirit knows the truth. So when it comes through and you don't understand the concept of this, as a mind, you're like, what the hell is this? This doesn't make sense. Why should I quit my job? Why should I talk to that person? Why would they talk to me? They're so beautiful, handsome. I don't think they'd be interested in me. Or, oh my God, that person's so wealthy and successful. Why would they see anything in me to hire me, right? That is the mind trying to be practical. But understand, intuition is not practical. Intuition is fluid and flowing. And when you show up and you do not fear, like the Bible suggests, that's when you don't have your mind involved with your intuition flowing through you. And that's when you answer your calling. You follow your purpose and you go in faith. And again, faith in Latin means conviction. Are you convinced that your intuition is leading you astray, or are you convinced that your mind is a safe place to be? And that's up for you to choose. That's your free will. So here, essentially in verse 2, the mind is trying to understand the spirit and being like, I don't like being out of control, because the mind loves control. So he's trying to like overconsume the spirit, understand, oh, what's the feminine nature as emotions? What's this emotional thing? The spirit, you get the picture. He's trying to like flood it, trying to like not forget it, but like take it in so it can stay in control. That's the whole point. All right, verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said unto him, Behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. Here God is visiting Abimelech at night, which means the subconscious, and a dream you could allude to is a meditation, okay? Because when you're in dreamlike state, you're not aware, and nighttime is your subconscious. So when you're not aware of what's in front of you and you're in this transient state, which is a dream, it most likely is alluding to a concept of meditation or inner reflection, because again, remember, Abraham went south, and going south is inner reflecting between your feminine and masculine nature, your spirit and your mind, and what's going on within you when you're in a place of conflict or friction, which is Gerar, and that's where he is. So all of this is just an allegory for what's going on in Abraham's head. King Abimelech does not exist, Sarah does not exist, and neither does Lot. It's all an aspect of what's going on in his psyche, okay? So God is visiting Abraham in his psyche and saying like, hey, you're talking to the mind, right? Because the mind, King Abimelech, is taking over Abraham's control of what is actually being the operating system right now. Now, it's not the spirit, it's not Sarah, it's the mind. And he's saying, like, hey, you're going to be a dead man if you keep this woman, because she's a man's wife. It's not the spirit. You're never going to be able to understand the spirit, because the mind is like oil and water, or oil and vinegar to the spirit. You need to have polarity and duality to understand unity, okay? If you never, let's say you're in a hot place, right? I feel like this has been said so many times in like different communities, but if you've only ever experienced hot, you don't know what cold is. But let's say you live in a place of seasons. You experience summer and you experience winter. When you're in summertime, you can quantify what hot is because you experience the extreme opposite, which is winter, which is cold. So in order for you to understand that you're a God on earth, you need to understand the tools that are at your possession. If you never had a spirit, you couldn't understand you weren't a mind. And that's the point of mind control. When people can get manipulated to do things, they're they're deterred to witness their spirit, and they stay stuck in their mind, and they stay stuck in the karmic loop of being controlled. But when you break free from that and you see, oh, I'm a spirit and a mind, I control my mind because it's a tool. Yeah, it wants to keep me safe, but I can also understand the power of I am and claim the concept that I am always safe, so therefore I have to be, right? I am that I am. So the fact that God is visiting Abraham and challenging his ego or mind and saying like, listen, you're trying to confuse your emotions for your spirit, you know that's not legit. Your emotions are a byproduct of your thoughts, of your mind, okay? If I have an emotional reaction, well, it is that. That's not coming from my spirit, that's coming from my judgment. But if I remove my emotions and my thoughts, what am I? I'm being present, and being present is spirit. So here, God is challenging Abraham and saying like, listen, dude, speaking to King Abimelech, being like, you think the emotions are your spirit, you got your ass backwards, essentially. So you need to understand that your spirit is a dual part of you, and you will never understand it fully. You need to just accept it, right? And that comes with the concept of like letting go, trusting, surrendering, all right? We will never understand reality. We just have to be. It's like a very stoic Marcus Aurelius kind of vibe, I guess. But in my opinion, the only truth is, what do you believe is true? And then that will become your experience. So then we have verse 4, but Abemelich had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? So here, like I said before with Pharaoh, Abemelich is like a level up from Pharaoh. Pharaoh is in Egypt. Egypt is a place of bondage. Abemelich is in Gerar. Gerar is a place of friction. Your first ego death is the hardest. That's why it's bondage. It fucking sucks, and it's scary because you never knew you had a spirit in you to literally witness and commune with. You're like, whoa, right? And then your second ego death, when you wake up again, you're like, oh, I fell asleep before. This isn't so bad. You know, falling asleep sucks, but waking up, like, I remember, you know? So it becomes friction at that point. It's not as challenging because you really did the heavy lifting during your first experience. So here, Abemelich, being a more evolved mind from Pharaoh, is saying, listen, I didn't touch Sarah. I took her in, yeah, but I didn't touch her. So you're gonna slay a righteous nation for that? And what that means is like, yeah, the mind still isn't fully developed to understand the dual nature of spirit and leave it alone. It's still self-obsessed with itself and being in control. So it wants to overwhelm it. It wants to consume it. It wants to take it in. But it also understands, listen, you know, something about this doesn't feel right. Like, I'm more so curious than I am obsessive about losing my power here. So like, who is this Sarah chick? What is a spirit? What is the emotions? And how do I really make it work in my favor to understand manifestation? Like, Abemelich is more, even though he's flawed, he's more so curious. Pharaoh just represents a complete asshole. Like, think of Cain and Abel. Cain kills his brother because that's how much of a savage he is. That represents the most beastly part of your mind because you have no morality, you have no connection to your spirit. Understand that this bloodline though, Cain and Abel turns into Noah, which becomes Abram to Abraham, and then like gives birth to Isaac, who then gives birth to Jacob, who becomes Israel. This lineage becomes far more progressively advanced in connection to their spirit as time goes on. Each introduction of characters is a ego death for you and a resurgence of your awareness of your spiritual nature. Basically, you're the one that's having a reincarnation of your psychology every time a new character is being introduced. So you can look at Pharaoh being linked to Cain, right? They're very savage because they represent the lowest nature of your mind. But Abemelich is like a level up. He's not as horrible, but you know, he's doing better. And it just shows the progress of your mind. The more you catch yourself, the more you recognize that your mind is just a tool and not your personality. So Abemelich here is like, listen, I know I messed up, but like, will you really slay a righteous nation? And the way I take this is, a nation, in my opinion, in mysticism, it doesn't mean like a geographical location. It does now, but the original meaning, from what I understand, means a consciousness, a united consciousness. So that's why we say one nation under God, one consciousness under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all, or whatever. You can see how there are mystic principles in the ways that, you know, governments are ran. Really, honestly, it's all based off of mysticism and like a higher level of knowing, but they don't tell us that, right? They dilute the meaning, they give it something that's very literal and practical for us to see, but honestly the truth is very much spiritually tied, in my opinion. And the more you look into it, the more you see how the world is ran the way it's ran, okay? So here, Abemelich is like, listen, being the mind, right? He represents the mind. He's like, listen, God, I know I messed up on this one, definitely fumbled, but are you gonna slay my all the good things I have done, all the things that I've done that were good, you know, like I walked that old lady across the street, I helped my cousin swim or ride a bike for the first time. Like, think of all the mindful choices I took, and you're gonna really grill me for this one mistake I made? That's not fair. Like, the mind is like trying to justify that it was in the right, even though it knows it's wrong, kind of, sort of. And you can see that dynamic within you. You'll try to talk yourself out of, you know, something bad you did, and then later on you might be like, yeah, I was wrong. You know, it's just the initial knee-jerk reaction, right? When you're confronted, because the mind wants to protect you. So it'll come up with bullshit like that to be like, I wasn't wrong. I mean, like, maybe a little, but like not really. And then like later on you're like, yeah, I fucked up. Okay, so we have verse 5. Said he not unto me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. And the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. So here, Abemelich, or the mind, is saying like, listen, they both told me that they had different relations, so I had no idea that this was happening. But also, man, like, you screwed up in the first place. You took her in. It doesn't matter what the relational aspect is. If you genuinely were embodying a tamed mind, you wouldn't be tempted. But that's how this works, right? How I brought up the Eve biting the apple is representative of temptation, but it's no coincidence that the firstborn from them becomes Cain and Abel, because that's a very unripened mind that's very beastly in nature and will kill its brother or its counterpart or its spirit just to have control. Okay, so here what's basically going on is like, it's a level up from being like very tempted to only being like kind of sort of tempted, right? Instead of like having a very obsessive knee-jerk reaction to be like, yeah, I'm taking her in, it was very much like, well, yeah, he took her in, but he didn't touch her. It shows that the mind is developing and like questioning its choices and where it really stands and what it wants to do. So then we have verse 6. And God said unto him in a dream, yeah, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. So here God knows that, you know, Abemelich is still evolving as a mind, but also understand that this plays or lends a hand to the Hermetic law of mentalism, in the sense of what you think, you know, the first law, I forget what it is. Essentially, like, your mind is a construct of what creates your reality. So here, it's like, you don't know what you don't know. If he didn't know that this was the relational aspect between these two people, he wouldn't get punished, because punishment, in the sense of what happens to you in reality, in my point of view, is you only will get the mirror of your judgments. So if you think something is bad, then most likely you will feel guilt, which will then trigger an effect, which will be a response to the cause you put out in the first place. So if I think stealing something is good because I have my reasons to believe that, chances are I won't get punished because I'm doing it for something good. But, you know, somebody might not have that, somebody might have more of a conditioned moral threshold and would just say like, no, money's horrible, I don't deserve it, all this stuff. Okay, well, that's going to be your mirror, right? It depends on what you think good is for you and what you think bad is for you, because that will then be your experience. And that's why, you know, God doesn't work on morality, because everyone gets to choose their version of morality, and that will then get pushed out into your world and you'll experience that, okay? So he's basically saying like, yeah, because you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to get a mirror effect of it, because like, you genuinely didn't do anything wrong. You just kind of fumbled because you were tempted. You took her in the first place. All right, then we have verse 7. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Look, thou, thine, that, shalt. So that was a tongue twister, okay? So here basically he's saying like, listen, if you don't restore this man's wife, you're gonna be dead. And I don't think it's implied here, but it's essentially like the rest of your family will be dead too, which is like super gruesome. It's just like, dude, I brought this chick in, I didn't touch her, and now you're gonna kill me? Like, what? If you take it literally though, right? And in my opinion, this isn't literal. Again, Abemelich represents the mind. If you don't restore the emotions back to Abemelich, meaning if you don't restore understanding that, the spirit isn't for you to control or to think you can understand through intellect, if you just give it back and work in coherence with it, in balance with it, you will be alive, right? You will understand life because you don't have to come from a survival mechanism reaction, right? The mind likes control. And as soon as the spirit comes in, it thinks it's dying off because it's like, what is this thing I can't compute, right? And it never will compute. The more you balance your mind and your spirit together, and you use your mind when you need to, and you use your intuition when you need to, then you see how they come into union in the sense of being in balance, yin and yang, right? The masculine, feminine nature. So the only reason why Abemelich would die is because he would never experience life through the spirit. You only do that through witnessing. You don't do it through control. So the mind has to witness the spirit and be cool that they're sharing the same brain, not get jealous and take it over and make you go crazy as the vessel that holds all this stuff going on, right? Verse 8, therefore Abemelich rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. So the fact that Abemelich woke up the next morning means he woke up to a new awareness of himself. Morning means consciousness, right? Because morning has light, and light is enlightenment, a new awareness, a new day. So the fact that he has a new awareness, he told his servants and told all the things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. So it implies that these are men servants, right? Men servants, relating to the masculine nature, means the part of your ego, right? The thoughts that you have. Abemelich, the mind itself, is rewiring its brain to have new thoughts saying, hey, we don't need to control Sarah. We just have to be okay that she's here with us in the body, in the human body. And we just have to kind of like make peace with it. We don't have to overanalyze it and obsess. We just have to share our space. And the men are sore afraid, meaning the old thoughts of you are sore afraid because you're not used to this, right? You're not used to having a spirit dwell with you when you're going through this rebirth process of your spirituality. So the men are afraid because they're like, oh, well, who are we going to become if we're not the ones in control, right? And that's a fair assessment. You're having an identity shift. Verse 9, then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee? And that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin. Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. So here you can look at this as your mind confronting what you just experienced, right? Let's say you go out and you do something and you have an emotional reaction, and then you wait a couple hours and then you have time to reflect, right? It's a very similar experience in my opinion. You do something because you're overwhelmed, you're scared. Sodom fell apart, meaning the old version of you fell apart, so you don't know who you are anymore, and you confuse your emotions for your spirit or vice versa, whatever, and your mind takes over and you have this whole crazy thing going on in your body, and you just feel overwhelmed and tired and exhausted, and now you finally hit a place in yourself where your mind can logically think, man, what am I doing, right? Why am I overwhelming myself? And this is essentially your mind asking you, what did you do this for, dude? Why are you going crazy trying to figure all this stuff out? Why did you do this to me? Why are you overusing me, right? Like, you have a lawnmower, okay? Are you gonna ride that lawnmower 24/7 until it like catches fire? No, you use the tool when you need it and you put it away when you don't, right? Because the overuse is what causes this burnout question. Why are you doing this? Why are you over obsessively using this item when you just need to use it at certain times, okay? And that's what the mind is. You only need it at certain times. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? This is just him again reiterating, what did you see? What made you think differently that made you do this crazy stuff? Verse 11, and Abraham said, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. So here, essentially, God is afraid that the mind won't understand the spirit, and it will force Abraham to go fall back asleep and only use the mind, as opposed to working in balance and unity with the spirit. Again, the mind is not like control, not losing control. So Abraham was scared that, hey, if I show the mind what the spirit really is, I'm terrified the mind will get mad and angry and just overcome it, overconsume it, and I'll just fall asleep again, because Abemelich is also a king that represents a community of people, okay? And the community of people are aspects of you. If you show up, let's say, literally to a community of people and you tell your truth to them and they represent the mind, that is like a mob mentality. They will have no concept of what you're talking about because you're coming from a spiritual point of view of your feminine nature. They're embodying a masculine nature that's not meant to change. So here, because they're the mind, that's what they do. So if you open up to the mind and you say, I'm genuinely God, the mind will be like, no, you're not. We're taking you back and you're going to stop thinking those weird, crazy things. And we're going to take you back to our community of church and make you believe God is outside of you and heaven is outside of you. And you can just stay here and be miserable in the pew and not have your prayers be answered, because that's just what happens here in church. Only some people get their prayers answered. And those are God's chosen people. And it's like so sad. And I mean no disrespect, but if people genuinely understood why their prayers don't get answered, it's because their lack of faith, which actually means conviction. They're not convinced. They're praying from a place of lack, so the mere experience will have to be lack. Of course you're not going to get what you want. Of course that person won't heal, because you're coming from a place of feeling so depleted, low, and lifeless. Like, people will say this thing where it's like, I'm a man who fears God or whatever, and it's like, okay, sure, but like if you fear God, you're fearing yourself. Like, are you scared of your shadow? The point isn't to be scared of God and what it can do. You are the one causing your reality, because what you think, what you feel, what you judge in the name of the Father, connection to source, in the name of the Son, your emotional expression, gets projected into the matrix or the mother who has a womb and will birth your experience. You're creating your life, but churches don't know this. And that's just the saddest part. So it's like here, Abraham is kind of speaking on that concept, being like, the mind doesn't understand the spirit, and if I tell it that, then maybe I'll lose this power, maybe I'll lose my connection to God, and I don't want to do that, because anyone who's awake and witnesses the beauty of their awareness does not ever want it to get taken away from them. So verse 12, and yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So here, if you take it literally, which also can, elaborate on the concept of people interbreeding with their own families and communities, it's essentially Abraham marrying his half-sister. And how that makes you more spiritual, I have no idea. If incest made me a holy person, then it's like, no, I'm not, that's disgusting. I'm not even going to reference me. If incest made people in general more holy, and I'm sure it's been done for hundreds of years, why isn't this world a better place? If literally doing all of the things that happen in the Bible made this world a better place, like circumcision as an example, why aren't those men more holy than ever? It's because circumcision doesn't mean the literal act of circumcising. And I mentioned that in another video, but it's just another thing to point out that, hey, if any of these traditions did anything for society, we wouldn't need a second coming of an actual human being called Jesus, because we'd be fixed. But we're more broken, separated, and desolate than ever, and that should get everyone's attention. Maybe there's more to this scripture than the literal sense. So if marrying your half-sister won't make you more holy, what could this possibly mean? Okay? Abraham and Sarah have the same father, and it's because both your spirit and both your mind are a product of the Father, or conscious awareness, source, God, whatever created this life experience we are humans in, okay? But not the daughter of my mother. Sarah has a different mother than Abraham, because Sarah was never born. The spirit cannot be created or destroyed, and that's why it doesn't have a mother, because it was never born in the first place. It just is. The mother, like I brought up before, derives from the word matrix, and matrix means womb, and a mother has a womb because a mother gives birth to a son, and you give birth to your son when you tap into your solar plexus and your heart and you give an emotional expression out into reality and have it mirror back to you. Children in the Bible are allegory for manifestations. So Sarah was never born of the same mother because she was never born and she will never die. She is your spirit. Abraham is born of the mother or the matrix because he needs to witness his thoughts and his emotions get born in front of him. That's why he has a mom, because he needs to use the matrix or the mother or the womb in order to produce and become a God and to be father on earth, right? So he's having this conversation with Abemelich, saying all this stuff, but that's what it really means. He's explaining how his connection to God is actually the way he creates manifestations. And the mind is just like, what? What are you talking about? Because again, the spirit is not for the mind to understand, it's for the mind to just experience and work in tandem with. So verse 13, and it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, and I said unto her, this is thy kindness which thou shalt shew unto me at every place whither we shall come, say of me, he is my brother. So when Abraham first started his spiritual journey leaving Ur, he did tell Sarah, hey, we're going to tell anybody who gives us trouble that you are my sister. And it's the whole reason for somebody who's spiritually awake not wanting to lose their spirit, because of the concept of people who are stuck in their minds pulling you back and making you fall asleep and be unconscious like them, okay? Because if you tell somebody, hey, the simulation comes from the concept of it having meaning womb, and womb gives birth to your manifestations, people will be like, what are you talking about, right? And that kind of reaction will make you fall asleep, because if the majority thinks that, you feel like an outsider, and that's why a lot of people who are spiritually aware become outcasts in that sense, because this journey isn't for the masses to an extent. It's for very few who are aware enough to practice this stuff, and that becomes the hero's journey. It's like, there's a reason why there aren't multiple Harry Potters helping him. It's Hermione and it's Ron, and those are aspects of his psyche, right? Hermione is the wisdom and Ron is the physical masculine nature that will help you, your mind, your tool, okay? And Harry's the one that has the mark over here. It's no coincidence. It's a lightning bolt, which is light, and light is right by your third eye. Of course, he's the Jesus figure, right? And I'm not saying that to be mean, I'm just pointing it out. This isn't all the successful blockbuster hits. They're all biblical, they're all mystical, okay? Mystic in nature. God here, Abraham, is always just wanting to protect his spirit. He's like, I don't ever want to lose my connection to source, and I just don't want the masses to make me fall asleep and make me forget who I really am, which is God. Verse 14, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham and restored him Sarah his wife. And here, Abraham is taking these specific animals because both of these animals and both of these servants represent the same exact thing. Sheep and women servants represent the feminine nature because they represent the inner wisdom, the femininity within you through your intuition, your emotions. Men servants and oxen represent physical labor, physical action taking, and the ego, okay? So it makes a lot of sense. Look at sheep. They're very delicate, docile, sweet. They won't hurt a fly. They're very content. Oxen, when, antagonized, will freaking charge you and they'll get pissed, and they're really good for work and stuff like that, and that's how you can see the dynamic. And then obviously through men servants and women servants, you see the gender and how that references the masculine and feminine principles within you, okay? So the fact that Abimelech is taking these things and giving them to Abraham, which then restores Sarah, means he brings the masculine and feminine nature within the mind into balance and restores Sarah the spirit, because you can only restore the spirit when you are in balance within yourself, and the mind has to get out of the way and give you permission to do that, right? Because you control your mind. So you need to permiss yourself or give yourself permission to be back into balance, to catch your thoughts. Because remember, Abimelech, the mind even was like, bro, what are you doing, Abraham? You're going crazy. Like, stop this madness. And he's like, you're right. So because Abraham complied to his thoughts, and as he was having this inner dialogue with himself, he's like, yeah, I've been this is not good. I need to change. And then that's when the restoration comes, when you catch yourself, when you reawaken. Verse 15, and Abimelech said, behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. Here the ego finally is like, I'm going to make room for the spirit. I don't need to overstep my boundaries here. I know that I'm not the only person that is inhabiting your brain, and I'm good with that. I'm okay with that. And that shows progress from you being Pharaoh to you being King Abimelech. I hope you can see that through your mind psychology, right? You permitting and allowing your spirit to be seen is a beautiful step in the right direction to have both of your feminine and masculine nature work in balance. Verse 16, and unto Sarah he said, behold, I had given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is thee a covering of thy eyes. Unto all that are with thee, and with all other, thus was reproved or reproved. I don't even know. So I'm gonna talk just about the concept of 1,000 pieces of silver and why that's so important. And essentially, Abimelech is talking to Sarah, the spirit. The mind is having a conversation with the spirit, as dual partners in Christ. crime, and saying, I give your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of thy eyes. Notice how here Sarah or Abimelech didn't reference Abraham as what's it called, the husband. It's the brother. So he's talking to Sarah as the spirit and is saying your brother, your partner in crime, to an extent, right? Like, that's just one opinion, but 1,000 pieces of silver is really important, because 10 in numerology is the completion of a cycle. So if you do 10 times 10 times 10, you have 1,000, which is a millennium, right? In terms of years. So I think, what was it? Wasn't Judas or Satan casted into whatever for 1,000 years? Apparently, like, that's just the concept of like really having a reckoning with yourself. 1,000 years is a hell of a lot of time to do integration. The fact that you're multiplying 10 by 3 means you're taking the divine, what's it called? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Trinity or whatever. 3 in mysticism is your mind, body, and spirit, okay? And to an extent, there's other ways to look at it, but essentially means completion. If you're completing it 3 times, I don't know if anybody out here is a Legend of Zelda fan, but you look at the Triforce, right? It's a triangle, 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 Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's the same concept as Harry Potter. I'm pretty sure Sheik in Zelda is the feminine nature, the wisdom. Link is courage, because he's the missing link between, what's his name, Gandalf. Gandalf represents God, but power, the ego. And you need to link both the powers, wisdom you need to link both energies, wisdom and power, in order to be God. That's why Link is the Harry Potter figure, the Jesus figure, because such a little dwarf, right? Using Navi, the fairy, the light, as navigation. That's why she's called Navi. And Navi helps you when you're lost or something, because she's trying to redirect you. That's your spirit, okay? And she'll always get you in terms of like hardship when you're being attacked. She's like, Link, listen, right? And it's like, oh yes, I need to remember conscious awareness. I need to keep myself safe. I need to wake up again. So 1,000 pieces of silver here is kind of like awarding Abemelich a rite of passage. You did so much inner work here. I'm so proud of you. Silver is a very reflective metal, right? Because it's almost like a mirror, which you can see because you had done so much integration of what you have learned. I'm going to reward you with this abundance, and look at it. It's an exact reflection of your behavior, which is beautiful, right? It's not gold, because gold, in my opinion, references the sun, which is consciousness. And then silver represents your subconscious inner work, because that's correlated to the moon. So the sun being gold is your conscious awareness, the Son of God. It's like that kind of vibe, okay? I'm not going to get too into it. But essentially, Abemelich is talking about like, hey, major props. I'm very proud of you. And this is just referencing all the inner work you had done, and you deserve it, okay? Verse 17, so Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. So here, Abraham is praying onto Abimelech, but again, Abimelech is just his mind. And if he's praying onto God, it means he's meditating. And because he's meditating on a restored mind, right, that's in balance now because it's working in union with Sarah, of course, the mind is going to give birth through the wife and the maidservants, and they bear children, because children, again, like I had said, are manifestations. They are new constructs of what your reprogramming was. So if you think something that you want to experience after going through like some crazy integration of like failure and like self-destruction or whatever, and you witness this power within you, and you're like, oh, I just have to think and feel and live in the wish fulfilled and redirect my energy, and you do that for a couple of days, and then you get the thing that you want, that is you bearing new children, because now you're in balance and you're in harmony, right? And that's what the prayers are. Prayer is just focused intention. So then we have verse 18, and it says, for the Lord had fast closed upon all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So here, he's basically saying before you couldn't manifest because you weren't in unity with yourself. I closed the womb, I closed the matrix because the mind was obsessed with the emotions and went into this karmic loop of like fruitlessness because it didn't witness the bullshit it was going through, right? Your emotions, your mind will drive you crazy. Unless you're sitting in silence, which is sitting in your spirit, you can't possibly observe your reality. The point is to always be in union with Sarah and to sit with her and chill with her and observe what your Abemelich is going through, your mind. And when you see Abemelich is acting wacky and trying to take Sarah over and bring her into his house, you say, no, you're important, but you're not that important. This is a teamwork effort here, okay? You need to work in balance in order to bear fruit, in order to have children. So all of it's just allegory of your mind going through a second death and rebirth process, witnessing its spirit and things of the like. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you you learned anything, or would add something different or have a different point of view. I always love hearing other people's takes on this stuff because it's very interesting, and like I said, I'm very passionate about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.